Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I hope everyone's afternoon, morning, evening, day is going well. I'm here today to share with you my monthly favorites from the month of June. It's now July and I had a really good month in June. I read a lot. I read like 10 books in 1 month, which is a little bit insane. And so I just wanted to share with you guys some of the stuff that I discovered this month, some of the stuff that I've been reading this month, some stuff I've been thinking about this month. First thing is an incredibly exciting thrift find. I found this jacket at the Value Village for $14. This is the Lana Del Rey racing jacket. It has like these patches with all her different album covers going down the sleeves, and one thing about me is I am a Lana Del Rey stan. I love Lana Del Rey. I just wanted to show you guys because this is probably the most exciting thing. One of the most exciting things that happened to me this month was finding this jacket. I finished my fall winter spring shade of my Red Dahlia lip balm. Basically the seasons when I'm whitest, when I'm at my whitest, is when I need to wear this one. But then in the summer I tan quite easily, and then this looks a little bit ridiculous, and so I have to switch to a slightly oranger shade, which is the shade Hibiscus. But it's still a rainy day and it's still early enough in the summer that I'm not super tanned, and so I finished this off. This is my favorite lip product of all time. Sometimes I'm like running late, I don't have time to do my makeup, I get to the bathroom before class and I use this lips, cheeks, eyes, and I feel instantly more put together. This is definitely the most flattering shade on me, I think, and I adore it so much. I've been listening to this. You can see there's a patch on my jacket. Here's the CD. This is her reading her poetry book, and then Jack Antonoff did some production behind it. I just find this very relaxing. I can't listen to this too much while I'm doing anything that requires me to pay attention. Like I can't listen to this while writing, kind of like I would to other music, because I am listening and paying attention to the poems. But I do really like her poetry, and I do think it sounds really good when she reads it. I do love listening to poets reading their work. If you ever looked up like videos of like Maya Angelou reading her work, or Sylvia Plath reading her work, there's such an emotion, and I think poetry, like singing and songwriting, like Lana knows how to articulate herself well through song and how to use her voice as kind of an emotive tool through song, and then she does the same thing really well on this. Now these aren't all the books that I read this month. These are just some of my favorites. And some of these are actually books that I didn't read this month, but are books that I've been thinking about this month. And so they're kind of included in this because they've been taking up a lot of my brain space this month. So the first book is the restored edition of Ariel by Sylvia Plath. I watched a really good YouTube video breaking down Plath's poems Lady Lazarus and Daddy, and I bought this for a class I was taking last fall, in university, and we read both of those poems. And then I watched this YouTube video, and I kind of thought that I had a grasp on what Plath was talking about in these two poems, but then I watched this video and I was like, fuck, I should have watched this before my class, because there was just so much more insight into the poem and such a different take and different analysis than what I had come up with. And so I kind of revisited the poems, and I've been thinking a lot about the poems. I have read thus far, I've read The Applicant, Lady Lazarus, and Daddy. And those are kind of the most famous ones, and I kind of want to read more because I do love Sylvia Plath's writing. I'll see if I can find the YouTube video that I watched, but it basically talked about Plath's, okay, spoilers for Lady Lazarus and Daddy, but Lady Lazarus in particular she's talking about her attempts and how her pain is kind of exploited, and drawing a lot of comparisons between her and like a circus performer. But she uses a lot of Nazi imagery. So yeah, there's a line, I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene. An engine chuffing me off like a Jew to Dachau, Auschwitz, Belsen. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. These poems are talking about kind of the commodification of her pain, but then the video is kind of saying, she's talking about how her pain and the pain of women is like commodified and made into this product that people then profit off of. But then she's using this imagery in her poetry. Is she also part of the problem? Her racism is kind of well documented as well through her poetry and through her writing. And so, I don't know, what right does she have to use Holocaust imagery? The analysis was so poignant and so sharp, so well done. I'm gonna see if I can find the video and link it. I'm probably doing a really shit job explaining it, but I've just been thinking a lot about these poems and revisiting these poems. Now, next book is What is Existentialism by Simone de Beauvoir. This is part of the Penguin Great Ideas series. So, as established by my previous video, I am having a little bit of an existential crisis. I am a little bit what is happening and going on in my life. It does really make you think about existentialism and why we do the things we do. She very helpfully, instead of just like trying to explain the concept to you, she uses a story to kind of set up what she's going to be talking about. So it says, what's the use of leaving? What's the use of leaving if it is to return home? What's the use of starting if you must stop? And yet, if I don't first decide to stop, it seems even more pointless to leave. Even the architect of the Tower of Babel thought that the sky was a ceiling and that someone would reach it one day. If Paris could push the limits of his conquests back beyond the earth, beyond the stars, his undertaking would only be more foolish because of it. His efforts would be dispersed without ever coming together for any goal. All human projects therefore seem absurd because they exist only by setting limits for themselves, and one can always overstep those limits, asking oneself derisively, why as far as this? Why not farther? What's the use? I do think that my personal thoughts and feelings about the universe, about human life, do align kind of with existentialism, and you have to kind of make your own meaning in life, and everything is kind of arbitrary. This is a really interesting thing to pick up. Really enjoyed this book. Next exciting read of the month. This is very English major literature student of me. I read Searching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion and was changed as a writer and as a woman and as a person experiencing life. I want to be Joan Didion's pen. Oh my god, this was such a good book. I starred some of the pages, some of the essays that I particularly love. The section of personal essays was probably my favorite. I do love a good personal essay. Let me see if I can find a page or quote that I really loved, because I can't take books out of the library. Well, I should, but I can't, because I like to underline, I like to scribble all over my books. I like to fold down the bottom corners if there's like whole pages that I find like just incredible. Okay, this was the essay that, like, this was the paragraph that just made me go. I read it to you. It all comes back. Even that recipe for sauerkraut. Even that brings it back. I was on Fire Island when I first made that sauerkraut, and it was raining, and we drank a lot of bourbon and ate the sauerkraut and went to bed at 10. And I listened to the rain at the end of the Atlantic and felt safe. I made the sauerkraut again last night, and it did not make me feel any safer. But that is, as they say, another story. Pardon? You could write a whole essay, a whole dissertation on that paragraph alone. Was the essay on keeping a notebook. I also really liked On Self-Respect. I don't want to spoil it too much, but then I really also loved the essay, the last one, Goodbye to All That, which is about New York. And I went to New York, not this past March, but the March before I went to New York for the first time, New York City. And I was like, this is a life-changing experience. I want to move here. I fell in love with New York City. And so the last essay in this book, Goodbye to All That, is about Joan living in New York City. And just the way that she reflects on her youth and living in New York and being a young person living in New York. She says, but one of the mixed blessings of being 20 and 21 and even 23 is a conviction that nothing like this, all evidence to the contrary notwithstanding, has ever happened to anyone before. And I think she really captures kind of how isolating I can imagine New York would be, especially moving there from California, which she did, and not potentially knowing anybody and being in just such a vastly different place. And especially when you're young, you do feel like nothing like how you're feeling has ever happened to anyone before. Like, you are the first person to be experiencing those emotions. And she's really good at capturing that feeling in this collection. This was so good. And now, the book that I think has partially helped spur on my existential crisis, or keep it going, is one of the best things that I've read so far this year. It might come across as a little bit pretentious, but also I don't really care too much, because I think that good literature is good literature regardless. So I read Paradise Lost by John Milton this month. This was an assigned reading for 2 of my classes last year, and I still hadn't read it in full. So I finally did it this month. I finished Paradise Lost, and I have to say, sometimes I read a classic book and I'm like, I don't understand why this one is so popular. There's some things that just don't click for you, and that's okay. But this book really, really clicked for me. The most interesting part of Paradise Lost for me is the idea of God's omnipotence omnipotence, his ability to see everything and know everything. He looks at you and he knows and sees everything about you, everything you're going to do, everything you've ever done. And so the book deals a lot with like the idea of free will and faith, and how that kind of conflicts with the almost authoritarian knowledge of God, because he knows everything. And so nothing you do or think can ever escape God. So Milton set out, he describes in the beginning of the book how he wants to use this poem to justify the ways of God to man, but it kind of backfired, or he kind of didn't achieve his purpose, because so even like the review, or like the little statement on the back from some guy who reviewed it, is like, he created the first romantic Satan. He paints Satan kind of in a very sympathetic light, probably unintentionally, because Milton was like a die-hard Protestant. Like, he loved God. He was a very religious man. And so the fact that he wrote this, and God doesn't always come across in the most flattering light, and God does come across as kind of a tyrant, is incredibly interesting. The fact that he was able to write this and still kind of maintain his faith is a little bit really interesting to me. And this all-seeing nature of God kind of hangs over the novel. Like, you can kind of feel it bleeding into everything else that's talked about, because nothing can happen without God knowing about it. And so I think that also goes to show Milton's skill as a writer, because you're still invested, even though this is the story of the Bible. And so it's kind of one of the most well-known stories probably ever. And so it's not exactly a new narrative. It's the way that Milton tells it and the stuff that he adds that makes it so incredibly interesting and captivating. And one thing that I realized once I finished it, and was kind of reflecting a little bit more, is that it's laid out the exact same way as the Odyssey, which makes sense because Milton drew a lot of inspiration from Greek and Roman epics. And so he was very inspired by Homer. But one thing that Homer does with the Odyssey, I'm going to say, spoiler warning, a little bit, but also you've had 2,000 years to read this book. So, the Odyssey starts in, like, if the story is a line, the Odyssey starts in the middle, and then it works its way up to a point, and then there's a bit where the character explains everything that had happened up to the point where the book started, and then you have the third act. And so Paradise Lost kind of starts with that. It starts with the Satan and the fallen angels being thrown out of heaven, and then we get to the point where Satan makes it to Eden, and then we have Raphael, an angel, explain the war that led to Satan's fall from heaven to Adam, and then you have the third act of the book. So it's laid out like the Odyssey, which I'm a little mad at myself for not clocking that business sooner. But incredible meditation on free will and morals and freedom and authority, honestly. And yeah, I can't believe that Milton wasn't like killed for this book. Honestly, it's not exactly the most flattering portrait of Christianity or of God. Yeah, this was a 5-star read for me. Anything that really gets me thinking, especially philosophically, theologically, I'm a sucker for. So this was an incredibly good book. I believe my English teacher from my first semester when she said this is one of the greatest works of literature. I would say, you know what, professor? You were maybe right. What do you know? Anyways, guys, those are my favorites from the month of June. Current read is Bonjour Tristesse. So this is what I'm reading in June going into July. So I'll let you know if this makes it to the monthly favorites, if this is one of the favorite things read come end of July. So far, 1 chapter in, loving it. Think it is definitely going to be favorite book material. And yeah, I'll keep you updated on what's going on with me. And yeah, I'll see you next week for another video. Bye, guys. Clock the red dahlia on the lips.